Okay. Oh man, I already forgot. 89.
89.
Special guest. We promised special guest, and we have special guest who we love hanging out with, who we've done a lot of projects with before. So I'm here with Mujhid, who runs HBCUvc, where she is really creating the next generation of the venture capitalists we want to co-invest with, and has a unique experience. This week, as folks know or may know on This Is Not Advice, we are talking about distinctions between life at a big company and life at a startup. And Dia, you've had a really rare experience, which is that you were at Lockheed Martin as an engineer for a decade, like more than a decade, right?
Yeah, a little bit more than a decade, but then people might think that I'm really old.
Well, no. I think in the life of airplanes, it's like, maybe you got to work on 1/4 of one airplane or something like that. I don't know how long it takes to make an airplane.
I'm joking, but yeah, so I was there for, I think, 12 years total, and then got this startup bug, so. Yeah,
the startup bug. So let's talk about that distinction. So here's the question. A lot of people go to school, they study to be a software engineer. Maybe you studied, I can't remember, computer science or electrical engineering. Yeah, and so and you're, by the way, now working with HBCUs, where my guess is a lot of the people you talk to have a technical background. And so not that many people have had the experience of not just a big company versus a startup, but startups very rarely work on big, long-term physical and electrical engineering problems. Like you've made big stuff at Lockheed Martin. So I would just love, from your personal experience, to understand, when you think about the experience of being an engineer in that kind of large organization versus what you see in startups, what do you wish people knew about the difference?
So one, I am now like a startup pusher, and I can't seem to get enough people to go and join startups. One, because this lens that I'm always like wealth creation, and I've seen over the years just the opportunity to create wealth, getting into a startup and being a part of that team that grows. But to be honest, it is also like probably one of the rare opportunities where you get to see without, this is kind of like risk-free to you, right? You join a team, a small team, you get to learn from the founder directly, learn what it's like to be an operator in such a small team. And you're not really taking too much of a risk if you have the opportunity to join it. You're still getting paid. It may not be a salary that's, that Accenture is offering you, but you're still getting paid, and you have the immense learning opportunity to learn about entrepreneurship directly from an operator itself.
And so let me ask you about that. I want to ask about the contrast to the big company experience. One of the things, as you know, that we do is we try to go around different places around the country and the world, learning about their startup ecosystems. And I spent some time a couple of years ago in the Middle East, in a Gulf state, which shall remain nameless. And a bunch of the people who are trained as engineers said, you know what our problem is with going to startups? They called it the mother effect. My mother is not proud of me if I go work at an organization that she has not heard of. Yes. And Lockheed Martin, that's a big brand, a lot of company, Google, Bloomberg, big brands. So there's that aspect to it of like, what do you find people need to get confident about in terms of their identity of what they can tell others? It's like you studied, you went to school in order to go to a startup. And then I would also love to understand, so you described the startup experience and what you like about it. I'd love it if you can contrast it with the good version of what you got out of the big company experience, because you're there for a decade. So obviously you voted with your feet to stay, or voted with your seat to stay where you were. So I'd love to hear your reflections on that.
Yeah, real quick, I think I voted with my insecurity.
Don't we all?
Yeah, because I was just unsure. I think going into, so one, I don't think I had a lot of career guidance going into, like, how do I choose a career? I think my perspective or my lens up until college and even after college was this background that I came from an environment that was part of the lower socioeconomic layer. And so I was really just extremely economically motivated. And so when I looked at opportunities, I looked at opportunities of who was going to pay me the most, right?
So when you say, just to interrupt, make sure I'm following, obviously we grew up, where did you grow up, by the way? I forget.
Philly.
In Philadelphia. Speaking of which, critical state for this election.
Yes.
Get all your friends to, organize folks to walk the vote. When you talk about solving for financials there, what I hear you saying is solving for short-term income. as opposed to wealth.
Right, and that's the difference. That it is one of the challenges that we try to work with our students and our fellows, because a lot of times the communities that we come from, we have bills that we need to pay right now, and so we can only think about what is going to get me to pay these bills, and it becomes a difficult lens to develop this lens of how do you evaluate short-term financial gain versus long-term wealth, and that is so difficult. Right.
And when you encourage people now who are struggling with that issue, I mean, look, I grew up public school kid, but obviously different experiences from other people. And yeah, like the first time I got offered a job with a real salary, I'm like, you telling me that number has a comma in it? And, you know, like, I mean, 6 digits, it's like, wow, that was really hard to turn down. And it was a part of what made me take that job. When you talk to folks now who are making that choice, what do you tell them?
Right. I ask them to really try to look at the long-term objective, right? I also try to, because I think they still look at just income as the only capital that they're gaining from this, right? And so we start to lay out some of the other opportunities in terms of the experience that you're able to gain at like a smaller company, and how that allows you to, one, go to another company, which may get you on this field of, if you're only purely looking at income. But the other thing is just equity and ownership, right? And most of these companies, these smaller startups, because they're smaller companies, they can't compete with pure salary, right? But if you're a part of that team that's going to grow, then you have entitlement to
Totally
ownership in that company. And so that's one of the things that we get them to look at.
And I think my observation is that the world is changing in terms of, like, if you now tell your mother that you work at a Silicon Valley startup, as long as, look, it's not like a lot of people who come from privilege, particularly wealth privilege, it's easier for them to work for equity because, like, they don't need money to pay the rent. But I think that, so first of all, I think startups are paying better with time. Second, I think that the culture is changing around it, where now, like, moms understand that you could do well at a startup. More moms understand than did before. Last little bit, when you think about the best thing that you got out of and I hear your Slack notifications going in the background, so I'm gonna let you get back to that. I know that sound. That's like a Pavlovian dog response here. When you think about the best thing you got out of working at a large company as an engineer, what's the best thing you got out of it?
Yeah, I mean, to this day, the network, like that early network of joining that company and being a new employee. So you kind of join with this cohort of other people who are fresh out of college and
totally
riding together because you don't know anything. And a friend of mine sent me a birthday wish, and he was like, remember when we went to that club for your birthday? And I was like, oh yeah. And I was like, that was when I turned 25.
That's
like,
so funny.
I was like,
it's so funny. It's so true. I'm close with the people who I started working at. I worked at a consulting firm, and some of those people are some of my people now. And a lot of it to me was about, because it's like school. It's like you're with a cohort of people and you're learning together. You happen to be working, but you're learning. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap it. But like I said before, when we were off camera, I would love, as often as you want, for us to continue this conversation. I'm Roy from Bloomberg Beta. We're here every weekday. And if there are questions folks have, you can hit us on Twitter. If you want us to have a guest, make a request. You know, we're easy to find on the internet. And Dia, I really appreciate it. And I just look forward to have many more excuses to collaborate on stuff with you.
Thank you so much, Roy. It was fun.